As Queen Elizabeth's final journal entry is revealed, delve into the most prolific royal diarists, from Queen Victoria to King George V. Hello and welcome to Royal Scandal. Please do well to like, subscribe, comment and turn on the notification bell so as not to miss out on any news updates. Just 2 days before she died, the late Queen Elizabeth sat down before bed with her fountain pen and private diary to record the day's events, just as she had done thousands of times across her 70-year reign. In keeping with what she once told society diarist Kenneth Rose, that she had no time to record conversations, only events. According to an updated biography by Robert Hardman, the entry simply read, "Edward came to see me." The Queen was referring to Sir Edward Young, her private secretary, who was helping to make the arrangements for the swearing-in of newly elected Prime Minister Liz Truss ministers. Appointing Britain's shortest ruling Prime Minister from Balmoral was to be the Queen's final public engagement before her death on September 8, 2022. It transpires that she was still writing her diary at Balmoral 2 days before her death, Hardman writes in the new edition of his biography of King Charles, as the Telegraph reports. Her last entry was as factual and practical as ever. A former member of the royal household once told The Sun in 2019 that the Queen wrote in her diary with a fountain pen using only black ink, and that each individual diary was marked with her cipher and numbered with a Roman numeral. The diaries were leather-bound, and writing an entry was the last act of the day for the late Queen every night, no matter how late the hour or how weary she may be, the former staffer said. It is an unmissable duty, and she writes at a desk, never in bed. Her diary was never intended to be a window into her thoughts and feelings, but an aide-memoir over the years, and a record of her working life for the archives. The late Queen Elizabeth is not the first, and definitely not the last, to have relied upon a diary to document the many engagements, meetings, visits and duties that make up the tapestry of royal life. It's said that King Charles has been keeping a journal for many years, but, now that he has ascended the throne, he is taking a leaf from his mother's book, and whittling down the longer, more florid entries. As a senior courtier told Hardman, he doesn't write great narrative diaries like he used to, but instead scribbles down his recollections and reflections at the end of every day. It is not, says Hardman, quite as self-analytical, humorous and readable as the journal he kept as a prince. One of the most prolific royal diarists was Queen Victoria, who kept a journal for most of her life, writing her first entry in 1832, at the age of just 13. She continued this habit for nearly 69 years until shortly before she died in 1901, aged 81, and in that time, she filled hundreds of volumes, 141 of which still survive today. Today, her recollections serve as an incredible window into Victorian Britain, covering key events of the Queen's life, including her coronation. Their good humor and excessive loyalty was beyond everything, and I really cannot say how proud I feel to be the Queen of such a nation, she wrote, in reference to the crowds who turned out to cheer her procession. Of her wedding to Prince Albert in 1840, Victoria wrote that the ceremony was very imposing, and fine and simple, and I think ought to make an everlasting impression on everyone who promises at the altar to keep what he or she promises, before referring to her "dearest Albert," and remarking that she felt so happy when the ring was put on. The Diamond Jubilee celebrations, meanwhile, to mark her 60 years on the throne in 1897, were recorded with an entry that remarked upon the enthusiasm of the crowd, with Queen Victoria adding, "The cheering was quite deafening, and every face seemed to be filled with real joy. I was much moved and gratified." Queen Victoria's private diaries were particularly special because they were often accompanied by sweet sketches in the monarch's own hand, of riding parties, her bridal headdress, Prince Albert's dog, Eos, and the couple's children. These offer an astoundingly intimate insight into the Queen's private life, while showcasing her considerable artistic skills. So detailed and lengthy were Victoria's entries, that Queen Elizabeth was once moved to admit in a documentary that her own journaling bore little resemblance. "I keep a diary, but not like Queen Victoria's. It's quite small," she told the then Bishop of Chelmsford. "But you write it in your own hand?" asked the cleric. "Oh yes," she replied, immediately. "Well, I can't write it any other way." Victoria's diaries were made accessible to the public in 2012, in the year of Queen Elizabeth's own Diamond Jubilee. It seems fitting that the subject of the first major public release of material from the Royal Archives is Queen Victoria, who was the first monarch to celebrate a Diamond Jubilee, she said in a statement, adding that she hoped the records would be used to enhance our knowledge and understanding of the past. It is perhaps understandable that Queen Elizabeth held diaries in such high regard, as her grandfather was, too, known for his regular journaling. King George V kept a daily diary throughout his life, in which he recorded many a significant event, including the death of his father in 1910, when he was still Prince George. "I have lost my best friend and the best of fathers. I never had a cross word with him in my life," he wrote in one extremely moving entry. "I am heartbroken and overwhelmed with grief, but God will help me in my responsibilities." Just 1 year later, on the event of his own coronation in 1911, the new king described in his diary the great and memorable day, but also reflected on the way in which it brought back to me many sad memories of 9 years ago when the beloved parents were crowned, showcasing a depth of personal feeling not always seen in his granddaughter's recollections. In other entries that remain in the Royal Collection Trust, the king records his private thoughts at the breaking news of the Russian Revolution in March 1917, and his attendance at a memorial service in July 1918 following the announcement of Nicholas II's death. In both entries, his affection for his cousin is clear. King George shared his passion for journaling with his wife, Queen Mary, who also fastidiously recorded her thoughts, feelings, and activities. In 1914, the Continental Powers had declared war on one another, but it was still unclear whether Britain would enter into the conflict. After dinner, a large crowd assembled in front of the palace and sang "God Save the King," and we went on the balcony and had a very good reception, she wrote on the 2nd of August. "The government has not yet decided what our action is to be. A statement will be made in the House of Commons tomorrow after they have come to a decision." Almost exactly a month later, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain would announce on the BBC that Britain was at war with Germany. The insights offered by these detailed diaries offer much more than just a glimpse into the day-to-day life of working royals. They also furnish historical events with incredible human texture, and serve to remind us that, in many senses, the royals are, behind the pomp and circumstance, much like any other family. Perhaps in time, King Charles's diaries, as well as those of his late mother, will be preserved in the same way as those of their ancestors, to live on as ordinary items that have become extraordinary historical artifacts. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe.